Well, brothers, we're here talking about freedom today, and we're inviting in our friends.
Yep.
And here's what I know. I know that right now, every year this moment happens, and there's a moment here in the United States where freedom gets talked about. Juneteenth, 4th of July, Memorial Day even before that.
Yep.
And there's all the conversation, and we have felt that as pastors, and we're trying to help our friends be able to step into and add value from time to time. So just for a moment, let's talk about those opportunities for freedom. So let's lift up for the group.
Sure.
Juneteenth.
Juneteenth.
So it's something that really has been lifted a lot in the last couple of
Recent
years.
And
so, King, talk to us a little bit about Juneteenth.
Well, let me backtrack to say Juneteenth has been in recent years discovered for me and my family. I didn't grow up celebrating Juneteenth. I always grew up celebrating July 4th. But when I found out about Juneteenth, it is the Emancipation Proclamation was given in 1863. That is when all African Americans were legally free. But in Galveston, Texas, the black slaves found out that they were free in 1865. So the Emancipation Proclamation was given in 1863. On June the 19th, 1865, they found out that they were actually free. Yeah, so once I discovered this new holiday, if you will, it honestly made me super excited as an African American to celebrate our freedom in America.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's Juneteenth.
So the origin of Juneteenth.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's the origin. Yep. Now I want you to tell us. I'm not going to ask Charlie because Charlie didn't grow up here, but I want you to tell us about July 4th because I really want you to tell us because in our nation and in our world, those two are kind of at war, and I don't think they have to be and should be specifically from a Christian perspective. But how would you define July 4th?
Yeah, well, it's the Declaration of Independence was on July 4th, 1776.
Yep.
And so most of us have grown up eating hot dogs and popping fireworks and maybe watching The Sandlot on July 4th. Right. But what it was a declared day of independence. If you go back and you read it, this was when the 13 colonies were declaring their independence from England. They weren't free. They were declaring it.
Right.
You go back and read it. They're declaring these inalienable rights that they were given by God. I mean, some beautiful Christian language there. And so then after declaring freedom, John Hancock, right? It's a big, they're saying now we're going to fight for freedom. And so the fight for freedom began in July 4th, 1776, but fully the consummation, the Declaration of Freedom, July 4th, the consummation of every individual actually being free in this nation didn't happen until Juneteenth occurred. And so that was decades.
Wow.
So those words were there, but the experience of freedom was not there for all. And that's where I think Christians have an opportunity from our worldview to be able to celebrate freedom declared, and a holiday both declared and experienced for every single man, woman from any background and ethnicity in our nation. Those two things aren't at odds. But the political reality is they try to put them at odds. That you can only celebrate one or the other.
And I always, why would it do that? Such a beautiful picture of kingdom. Like everybody coming to freedom, and that's something our soul go after. Like I'm thinking about myself, 17-year-old kid leaving Venezuela to come here. What do I have to do with this conversation? I almost feel like, what do I have to do with this conversation? And it's our soul go after freedom. And I've seen people, listen to this is kind of cool. I've seen people from other countries that have nothing to do with America, and they look forward to July 4th. And then here comes Juneteenth. And then learning about that, because it's fresh. I mean, isn't it?
It is.
I mean, it's fresh for a lot of us, not just us that it's not from America. But as I was getting ready to take the U.S. citizenship test, I'm learning all this stuff. And I'm blown away about not only the freedom that we get in this conversation, man, just the beauty of how powerful it is to really understand that that we can also have this freedom in Jesus. But for me, my perspective is very unique. I'm not from America. Here I come into this land that you do experience some freedoms that we don't get to experience where I come from. And I have my mom and my aunt learning all these things because they're going to take the test. And I'm like reminded of how grateful we are for all these freedoms, for all these freedoms. So that's my story. Just to get to see this from a different perspective and say, man, this is a good thing.
Give me one or two like reasons that you celebrate freedom in America that you didn't in Venezuela. Like, I don't know what it's like living in Venezuela. So like, unpack for me why you love this nation. Like, I do as well, but you coming in at 17 years old. Like,
man, that's a great question.
Yeah.
One of the things that we get to do here that we don't get to do there is the freedom of speech. I mean, anything you post, you could be in trouble. Like, truly, legally in trouble.
So you're saying if I get on TikTok, there's something...
Oh, bro, you better
like,
watch it.
Or Instagram. I better not say TikTok. That may be a dangerous topic.
And you know this because your wife,
Yeah.
background is Cuban.
Yeah.
A lot of things didn't come about in countries like that. Like, Facebook wasn't a thing till later on in life. You know what I'm saying? Like, all this is new. So we don't have a freedom of speech when it comes to certain things because then you're against somebody. And so
Like in the government.
Yeah. And then the conversations become really hard. So if you can picture this, we come here and then you get to at least talk to people about what is your perspective.
Yeah.
And listen.
Yeah.
That's one of them that's pretty big.
Wow.
And so at my house, if you can imagine, all kinds of people talking about all the things and all the things. But this is what my job is in my house. It's like bring them up. That's great.
Yeah.
And America's great, but just remember kingdom.
Yeah.
Kingdom.
I have to do the same thing in my house too.
You have
so
to.
You know.
Yeah.
No,
You
it's
have
a real
to.
thing. Yeah.
So that's my perspective, and I think just listening to the beauty of like the history of why we celebrate certain things and why it's so important. So what is like I always wonder, in your family when you guys talk about Juneteenth, are there any memories? Are there any people in your family who are like, this is why it's so important because I remember my grandma. Oh, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I love those stories.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you one. My granddad actually. So I sat down with him probably 4 or 5 years ago when I was deep into this race conversation because I had some trauma myself, some experiences, and so in that I wanted to ask his question about church.
Yeah.
Because I come from a Christian family. My granddad, great granddad, loved the Lord. No pastors that I know of historically. But all that to say, in the conversation, I realized that my granddad's only day of freedom growing up was on Sunday. So he wasn't a slave. He wasn't in slavery. He was a part of segregation. But his only day of freedom was on Sunday. And that was their day of worship. So I learned in that time why the black church goes so long today is because of historically that's how it had to be. And as we talk about freedom, the scripture says that where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. Yeah. And so I've had to take that approach of we don't have to always do the things that we've always done in today's context. He whom the Son sets free is free indeed. And so, man, honestly, knowing the history of my family, but also knowing the freedom that I have now in this country is super important. But I'll tell you another story. I've never told this to anybody.
Here comes fresh bread.
Been waiting for this.
Like, my family knows this. My granddad's at my house like 3 weeks ago, sitting on the couch talking to my wife and I. And he says, you know where I got my name from? So my dad's name, Enoch. He passed away last year. My dad passed away last year. My granddad said, you know where I got my name from? And I was like, no. His name is Enoch Wilson Paul. So he was Enoch Wilson Paul. My dad was Junior. My brother's the third, and then my nephew is Enoch as well. He said there was a white family that took such good care of our family that my dad named me after him.
What?
So Enoch Wilson came from a white man who loved my family so well that he named my granddad Enoch Wilson, and it's lived on 4 generations, bro. So think about the unity in Christ of like with such a dark history of racism and division, how God can use his church to bring unity. That's good. Candidly speaking, I never told anybody else that besides my family. Yeah. But yeah, that's man, good. It's just been an encouragement to me.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Yes. So should Christians be scared to address freedom? And how do they talk about it? Do they have to pick a side?
Great.
Do you have to celebrate Juneteenth or July 4th? I think this is what people feel, right?
Yeah.
And so I just want to put that before you guys, my brothers. How do I help my kids understand this? How do we help celebrate this? What should the approach be?
Yeah. You looking at me? I'm looking at you.
I don't know, man. I'll let you go first.
No, I was just gonna say I don't think we put these at war because we are Christians. We have a better view than the world, and so I say that to say I understand why there's so much angst and division in the world because it's the world. Yeah. But it's also who Jesus came to die for. So we have an opportunity to not put these two things at war, but to bring them together as one, to say, hey, I'm not just going to celebrate one. We're going to celebrate God. And through celebrating him, we're going to celebrate every culture, every nation, every tribe, every tongue. That's what we'll experience in heaven. Yes. Jesus said, let your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Yeah. So all that to say, I think with the celebrations, I'll say this as well. I know I've had so many conversations with my white brothers and sisters that are fearful to celebrate because they maybe saw on social media or something on a news network or a coworker at work who doesn't believe the same thing I believe. I always say they may not be a Christian, and I understand their pain and why they wouldn't want you to celebrate, but for me, I don't agree with it. So I think it's an opportunity for us to celebrate both, and that celebration looks different for every person too. But that being said, I got a text from some friends today that said, hey, for Juneteenth, let's go play some golf. These are all black guys, and just say, hey, let's go play some golf and like celebrate the freedom we have in our country, and also the lives that have been laid on the line for us to have the freedom that we have in America today. And so we're gonna go play golf on actually the 16th. Earlier that morning, can't be too hot, can't get too dark, you know what I mean?
You gonna win?
You know it.
Okay.
You know it. So yeah, man, that's just in a nutshell what I would say to that point.
Come on,
That's
I love
what I
that.
would say.
What do you think, brother?
I'm thinking about all kinds of things, really. But I'll say this: the way that we look at just about anything, I keep going back to kingdom, because the truth is, as a Venezuelan, I go to Venezuela, I don't feel like I'm at home. And then I come back to America, I told you this before, I feel like I'm in somebody else's yard. And then God starts like really, really, really showing me, man, that's how I intended it to be.
That's right.
So that I can celebrate freedom for sure. Yeah. And this, the freedom that we're talking about in this country, but how much more can we look forward to that freedom that, we can live it now, but the freedom that we'll experience in the kingdom of God. I asked my mother-in-law one time, after her husband got killed, she moved from Venezuela to here, and she had to live with me. That's not easy. So she stays with me.
She's not watching this video.
Well, she's not going to understand it. So we'll be fine. Unless we translate it. Well, please don't do that. I would not try to. So I hope she didn't want to do this. But listen, I asked her, I said, how do you do this? Like, truly. Yeah. How do you do this? How do you praise Jesus and, you lost everything? And then she said this to me. She said, I have learned to suffer well. One of the things you guys, as African Americans, they did so well, generationally, suffer so well. They suffer well, So for me, man, I'll say this, is understanding that the suffering well has a fruit that we get to experience now. My kids, Venezuelan American. I have to teach them what that means.
What's so crazy is your story, what you're talking about for your kids and grandkids is I'm the product of now. Like, my granddad suffer well so that I can live the life that I live now.
I'm your granddad.
Yeah. You're old enough to be.
I am. Don't say that too loud. But anyways, that's where I think my heart is in this conversation, which I'm honored because honestly, like as I sit down here, I just want to hear you talk. And learn, because we want to celebrate things that matter. That matter to Jesus. I think he was the perfect picture of all of this.
That's right.
He did it, man. He died.
That's right.
And how many people have died for our freedom in this nation? So, anyways,
Good word, man.
Yeah, it is.
Good word.
It is.
Well, I just say opportunities are going to come up every year.
Yeah.
And as opportunities come up, taking the approach that you see Paul take in Athens has always been the way I've leaned. Is, see culture, point out and celebrate the worship of Athens. That's what he did.
Yeah.
But then he looked for the opportunity to grab the unknown God and say, can I proclaim to you another kingdom? And so as we come around freedom, every year we have this chance. That's the prayer. I pray that you guys help me, and I'm going to do my best to help you, and we'll do our best to help others.
That's right.
Look for the opportunity to step through the doors of these spaces of freedom, and man, show people that there's just a shadow, like you mentioned. We're not supposed to be satisfied here because there's a higher freedom. There's another kingdom.
You said it better than me.
And
Man. That's good. That's so good.
we're pilgrims and sojourners,
That's
but
right.
we're on our way somewhere else. So let's look for the opportunities to do that.
That's good. Thank you for that.